The stage is now set, the final 2 episodes of Picard are arriving, just as inevitable as the Simps. Let's see what this episode has in store for us. Hey everyone, my name's Captain Jack and welcome to Trek Central. Today we'll be reviewing Star Trek Picard Episode 9 titled Et in Arcadia Ego Part 1. As we always like to remind you, this video will contain spoilers for Star Trek Picard, therefore if you've not seen the episode yet then turn away now, you have been warned. If you're new to Trek Central, then we'd kindly ask you to consider subscribing to the channel as we continue to deliver brand new Star Trek videos to you every week. Alright, with that out of the way, let's dive into this episode. Episode 9 picks up right where we left off from last week. Picard and the crew manage to get to the synth planet before the Romulans arrive using the Borg conduit. I have to say that the use of a Borg conduit to do so is pretty good writing as it fits well within the universe. You know, they've not magically managed to get there faster, there is a reason behind it. The Borg conduit itself looked amazing, still looking very modern but having similarities to what we saw in Star Trek Voyager. Now if you actually look at the synth planet, you can see the electrical storms which Soji saw in her dream sequence. It looks like these only follow the night side of the planet, which explains why we do not see any electrical storms when the crew later land on the planet. You can also see the 2 red moons around the planet as well, which is quite a nice detail and matches with it. The alarm klaxons aboard La Serena sound, which might actually be the first for the series, but it was great to hear like a modernised version of Red Alert. As we saw at the end of the last episode, Narek is still trailing them, but he knew where La Serena would be, and he kind of explained it and followed them here. It is explained in this episode that he kind of extrapolated where they were going, which kind of makes sense, but it also doesn't, but oh well. I don't know, it's confusing, but hey. We also actually get to see the Snakehead shuttle or fighter he's piloting in more action, and it's beautiful. The whole dogfighting scenes were really good in this episode, and kind of gave us another mini space battle. We do get some more views of this Romulan attack ship, which really cements its new cool design within the world of Star Trek. Hopefully sometime soon within the next year we'll get some more detailed looks at these ships through the likes of Hero Collector and such, as I would very much like that. I personally can't wait to get a model of La Serena on my desk, I think that'll be great. Now out of nowhere, I think this is my favourite scene from the whole episode, the Borg Cube arrives through the conduit. This made me smile so much, and just felt amazing that this giant cube arrived above the planet. We can really see where the VFX budget for this series has been going. Someone's been certainly spending those pennies. Now this is where things do get slightly more interesting, as when we were speculating and breaking down the preview of this thing, we thought giant flowers were attacking the ships. Turns out we were right. We get these giant flower ships that appear. Now at first I believe these might have been some sort of organic creation, kind of like how Species 8472 used organic starships in Star Trek Voyager. And that would seem to be pretty interesting that synthetics can use organic ships, but alas it's not. They actually seem some sort of weapons of sort, because they attach to the ships and drain them of their power, and bring them down crashing to the planet's surface. We actually see like 3 of them, or was it 2 to 3 of them, attaching themselves to the Borg Cube and dragging that thing into the atmosphere of the planet, bringing it crashing down. Now obviously Picard's health gets to him very intense this time. Picard experiences visions of what has happened to him since he heard of his terminal condition. Starting with the doctor, then a few other things, it kind of reminds us of the audience about what's going on so far, almost serving as like a mini recap of the series so far, which is a nice way of doing it and fits in with the lore just before the season final. Though I will say, Picard handles it like a champ and is very stubborn as well, saying if anyone who treats me like a dying man will run the risk of pissing me off. Which just had me smiling. I just love the way of him saying this, it kind of is funny in a way. I know he's dying and all, but the way he said that, it's just funny in my mind. Now this announcement deeply affects his new crew, as it, obviously would, as they most likely feel powerless into what they can do. Raffi is particularly affected by this, and that's given because she's known Jean-Luc for much longer than the rest of the crew. It makes sense that she should be more affected by this. She was his first officer for about 5 years. We see this come out a little further in the episode where she almost breaks down to tell Picard she loves him, and he returns the same sentiment. Okay, now let's talk about the Borg Cube, Elnor, and 7 of 9 for a moment, as I feel a bit weird about this. Obviously the Borg Cube has been crippled after it crash landed on the planet, meaning most of its systems are apparently damaged, which is a shame as I was hoping to see the cube kicking some Romulan ass. Though I find myself once again feeling like 7 of 9 was not really used as much as she could have been. Realistically, she had about 3 minutes in this episode, most likely less than that. The scenes on the cube seem to go by super quickly, as they always do in this series apparently, and only really aided in informing us that 218 Romulan warbirds were approaching the system. This could have been done anywhere even without the cube. I just find it a little bit boring that we didn't get more 7 of 9, like we should have got more of her. The same goes with Elnor. Though we do get some nice moments of Elnor learning that Picard is dying and wondering if he'll get to see him again or not, and whether his current loyalty to the 7 of the XBs is rightly placed, or whether he should help Picard. As Picard leaves, we find him walking into a bright light, almost as if this visual is hinting towards something in the future. I'll touch more back on the Borg Cube side of things a little bit later. Now the group make their way to Copolius Station, the small synthetic settlement on the planet. A nice little detail as Picard and co make their way through the settlement is it is filled with twins. A big question posed by especially the previous episode was that if there are more androids, then why were they made in pairs? And now we know that many twins were made. There are also more Data-looking androids with a golden skin and weird-looking eyes, probably showing how Maddox perfected his craft and why Soji and Dahj went out only 3 years ago. They are essentially the most advanced type. Now, a part of this episode I did not particularly like was the introduction of Dr. Altan Ingo Sung, the son of Dr. Noonien Sung, who created Data. It's not the weirdest thing to introduce, as Trek is kind of used to making up family members at this point, with Spock's half-brother and adopted sister, but it just feels a little off to me. I will say, I'm fine with Brent Spiner playing this version of Soong, and even though he's the same person who played his father, the old makeup in The Next Generation was so bad it could have been another person. You'll have to agree with me on that point, I think. However, it now makes sense of what Maddox said in the previous episode. As Maddox was talking to Jurati before he kind of bit the dust, he was saying, "We did it, Soong and I." Before now, we thought it meant that he was using Soong's work from the positrons of Data to make the androids. But Maddox was actually talking about this new Soong, the son of the actual Dr. Noonien Sung. Now this episode also introduces the Sutra, Jana's sister. They perhaps are one of the first androids, as they look more like Data, but are still looking like Dahj and Soji. I would like to theorize that Sutra, and maybe even all the androids, are descendants of Lore and not in fact of Data. This idea has been thrown around a lot within the fandom, but Sutra's actions in this episode kinda say something. We'll touch a little bit on about this in a minute. Luckily for us, episode 9 continues to push the plot along as expected, with episode 10 obviously being the season final. We learned that the admission was actually intended for synthetic minds, not organics like Romulans. This message was not a warning, but instead intended for synthetic life forms to inform them of a higher synthetic life awaiting them on the outside of a galaxy. They will essentially be their salvation. The creation of more synthetic life forms has been a big question for us, the viewers, since episode 1. Thankfully, this episode provides us with more lore around this subject, with the fact Maddox and Dr. Altan Sung worked together to perfect his father's work. There's even a hint regarding the life of Data in this episode. Altan Sung mentions how Maddox was at least trying to research the idea of mind transfer. To me, this is almost a reference to what Data tried to do with B4 in Star Trek Nemesis, essentially copying and pasting his mind into B4. Ultimately, we know this did not work, and B4 ended up breaking down due to the information put into him, but it seems like Maddox was determined to make it work in the long run. Whether we'll see an actual version of Data in Star Trek Picard, I would say is highly unlikely. Towards the end of episode 9, things heat up as expected, due to next week being the season final. The tension builds as the synthetics move to secure their own survival without trusting Picard. It almost feels like Sutra is manipulating the other synthetic members of the planet. Why she would do this is unknown, but then again, she has seen the message that was left behind for her species. The Simps and Dr. Sung, along with Jurati, now plan to construct the transmitter in order to summon this mysterious species. This is what we meant by maybe lore or related in some way, I don't know, but Picard does try to convince the synthetics that the Federation will help them via one of his grand speeches. However, as expected, this does not exactly go to plan, and kind of backfires when they place him under house arrest. During our speculation for this episode, I was wondering if Admiral Clancy and the Federation would turn up to help Picard. I know many were thinking that they would arrive and not help him, furthermore going as far as to destroy the Simps. Episode 9 almost suggests that there's no help coming from the Federation, with Picard's transmissions going unanswered to Starfleet Command. The end of the episode almost mirrors Admiral Picard's efforts during the Romulan relocation mission. He tries to save them, but it does not go to plan, though he does indeed remark that Soji will become the Destroyer, just like the prophecy suggested. The episode ends with an interesting scene. We finally get an interestingly new Romulan warbird, with Commodore O standing on the bridge. This is the Romulan fleet approaching a planet preparing to end all synthetic life, and oh boy, they have a ton of ships, 218 to be exact. The episode ends with that scene, and I have to say, this was a very cool episode. Let me share some final thoughts on it with you. Sometimes in series, the second to last episode is spent mopping up a lot of details in order to set up for the giant season final, which usually includes some battles and various other explosions culminating in a cliffhanger ending. We've almost come to expect that from certain shows by now. However, episode 9 continues to be very interesting and further advances the plot of Star Trek Picard. I personally love the interactions between Picard and the synthetic life forms on the planet. This worked really well, obviously up until things went, kinda bad. As I mentioned before, the only thing that really irked me with this episode was the use of 7 of 9. On further thought, it kinda makes sense that she'd stay on the cube to help the XBs, and who knows, maybe they'll help out in episode 10. But it just did not serve much purpose, I feel. If we're going to include 7 in an episode, let's get her doing some cool stuff or have some meaningful moments on screen. Here I don't think she did, and it's kinda disappointing. I can only hope that episode 10 may give us some more 7 of 9 badass moments. Perhaps she finds the Borg sphere inside the cube and takes it for a joyride, blowing up some Romulan ships while she's at it. A man can dream. This episode reinforces the point that Picard is effectively dying, not only to us but also to the new characters around him. I'm now personally wondering how this will tie into the season final of Series 1 for Star Trek Picard. Having Jean-Luc die would be a bold move by the series production team, and personally I'm not sure I could really take that. We'll have to see how it ultimately plays out next week. I have a feeling that episode 10 will answer some of the big plot questions currently on display in this series, but not all of them. My biggest question is if we're going to be left on a cliffhanger for season 1 or not. If you want to find out more about what we think is going to happen in episode 10 of the series, you can catch our weekly speculation episode for what's coming up. If you have any theories of your own that you'd like us to discuss, then leave them in the comments section below. That's it from us here on Trek Central today. If you want to take part in our larger discussions for Star Trek Picard episode 9, then we invite you to come and join our weekly Trek Central live streams every Sunday at 9 PM GMT. Beam down and share your thoughts with us. If you want to keep up to date on all things Star Trek news, lore and more, then make sure to subscribe to Trek Central here on YouTube. You can also follow us on social media for daily updates, visit the website, or even join our brand new community Discord server. For now, I've been Captain Jack, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.